Welcome back to A Story to Tell from the campus of Dixie State University. This is Lane Rano. We're speaking with Shirlee Draper. Shirlee, how are you?
Good, how are you?
You look beautiful today.
Thank you.
I understand women are always concerned about their looks. Is that right?
Well, I'm not always, but I don't like to be taken unawares.
Well, you look beautiful. Tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you came from, what you're doing.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Colorado City, which in the polygamist group that is now known as the FLDS. And I grew up there, had a really kind of picturesque childhood, a really village raising. And then when Warren Jeffs took over, I left the community, took my children and left the community. And since I have spent a lot of time doing advocacy for others who have found the need to leave or have been expelled. And now I have a nonprofit agency called Cherish Families that we do that kind of work with. And I have a social work degree and almost completed my Master of Public Administration.
Wow. Where are you going to school?
University of Utah.
I've heard of that.
I'll bet you have.
I went there myself.
Excellent. Well, I'll invite you to the alumni day of service in a few days.
We'll do it.
I will.
Well, tell me about what you're doing. Elaborate on it.
Okay, so it's based on my experience, and I can tell you more about that if you want.
Sure.
But in my experience of really having a hard time transitioning from a really closed community to mainstream society, and it was extremely difficult to find resources and get social and emotional support, financial transition, education, all those kinds of things. And so in an effort to make it so that other people weren't trapped where they didn't want to be, like I had been for many years, I set about creating bridges and ways that people could make that transition.
You say it's a closed society. What do you mean by that?
Well, I don't think it comes as any surprise to anybody to know that, they're suspicious of outsiders, very suspicious of the government, and for good reason. I mean, there's been a lot of raids and arrests and, crackdowns on living their religion. And so they don't let a lot of people in. And so even, you can drive into the community, but you're not welcomed, as one of them, and you won't find out much about them by having conversations and things like that. So, and aside from that, back when I left, all of the land and all of the homes were owned by the church as well. It was owned by a trust that was owned by the church, and now that's no longer true. But
what happened to that?
So the state took over the trust back in 2006. Warren Jeffs wasn't defending the trust in court, and because it was a charitable trust, it falls under the Attorney General to defend a charitable trust. And when its directors are not defending it properly or not managing it properly, he has to step in and take over, and he would do that to any charitable trust that was not doing what it was supposed to. All nonprofits in Utah are under the direction of the Attorney General in that capacity. And so the Attorney General asked the federal judge to put it in receivership, which she did. And since then, it's been managed by a special fiduciary and now by a citizen board, which I actually serve on. So now the land and homes in the community are no longer controlled by the church, but back when I was trying to leave, they were. And so nobody could come and move into town without permission of the church. And then nobody could live there without the permission of the church too, and so that's why they were expelling people and telling them to leave.
Well, the people that still live there, active in the church, are their homes in the trust too?
Yes, they are.
How do they feel about that?
They are quite adverse to the trust because they felt like that the state had no right to take that out of the hands of their prophet. And so with a lack of information, which most of the people who are still active are very limited in the actual information that they have. They're only allowed to have the information that Warren Jeffs gives them. And so without actual information about what happened and the reason things are the way they are quite dogmatic, and they want things to be the way they were and remain under the control of Warren Jeffs.
Why do they want that? Isn't he in prison?
Yes, but they also believe that he's in prison unjustly. Again, limited information. They're not allowed to have newspapers, television, internet, any outside information. They're only allowed to have the information they're fed through his channels.
Well, I don't read papers. I don't watch TV. Well, I watch these shows, but it's too bad. Well, isn't his brother involved, or wasn't his brother involved?
Yes. And Lyle was arrested for the food stamp fraud that happened, and now he's in custody again after fleeing. So, yes, he was involved.
Sounds like a mess.
It is quite a mess. And it was Warren Jeffs taking over, again, like I say, when I was there, when I was born and raised there, there was a lot more stability. There was, we allowed our relatives and friends from outside the community come and visit us, and we didn't shun anybody. I went to public school. I had public education all the way through my associate's degree. And, education was allowed. The community was open. We had our families were stable. We had home entertainment. It was really, I didn't know any different. I was born into it, and it was a great upbringing. I look back on it with much fondness.
Well, his father was in charge then, wasn't he?
His father rose to power when I was 16. So Leroy Johnson was the prophet in my childhood. And even during Rulin' Jeff's rule, it started to get more strict and different from what I was raised as. But it was a slow transition, and so it wasn't as hard for me. But as soon as he had a stroke and Warren took over, Warren started to shut down the public schools and tear down the basketball courts and shut down the dances and the community events and programs, the Harvest Festival and things like that. He would stop all of those things. And then he started tearing families apart. And those changes were so abrupt and so distasteful to me. That's when I knew I needed to leave.
How old were you when you left?
34. I think I apostatized in my heart when I was around 30. I was really done with it. But this is why I'm telling the story. For 4 years, I had to stay there because I had no resources. I had no way to get out. So you have to understand, I had 2 special needs children, and one of them was critically medically fragile. And all of her nighttime nursing care was inside the community. By that point, we weren't associating with friends and family on the outside because we'd been told to shun them. And I didn't have any rental history. I had no credit history. I had no assets of my own that I owned.
You didn't exist outside.
Yeah, I didn't. And so for 4 years, I didn't dare tell anybody inside the community that I no longer believed because they would expel me and with nothing, And so I had these 4 children, and I'm thinking, how am I going to make this work? I've got to leave. What he's doing is wrong, and I can see, there's handwriting on the wall. He's destroying this community. But I would go to St. George. I'd take my daughter to her doctor appointment, and I would look around and think, I wonder if I can create some sense of belonging here. Because my family and my friends and my very identity, my sense of belonging, everything that a person needs to survive, the deepest psychological needs, all of that was provided by the community. And so to give all of that up and go to a place that I didn't know anybody and I had no resources and I had no sense of belonging, it was a very, very difficult time for me to figure out that transition. And then even worse, I would come to St. George and I would look around and I would think, I wonder if that person would be my friend. I wonder if I could fit in here. And then I would turn around and find my cart full of condoms in Walmart. And people would come up to me and assault me about my lifestyle choices and whether or not I believed in this man. And it was an extremely hostile environment.
And they recognized you because of the way you dressed.
And I stood out because of the way I dressed. But in my heart, I was dying to find some sense of community and support and acceptance so that I could make that transition. And it was not there. St. George was not welcoming to me. And so...
Why do you think that was?
Because of there's a dominant discourse that surrounds the communities. And that's one of the things I labor very hard to uproot when I do cultural competence education for outside agencies and for groups and programs and companies, so that people can start breaking down the notions of what they know or what they believe about those communities, so that there can be this commonality. Because what would happen, and I see it especially more now that I'm on the outside looking in, there's this tendency for people from the outside to know all these crimes, and to believe all of these stories that are told, because nobody on the inside's talking, right? They're afraid. So they're not talking and they're not disabusing these stories. And so there's all of these stories that float around about how, they murder their retarded children, and all of them marry
I've never heard that
underage.
before.
Well, good. I won't have to break that one down for you. Or all of them are married underage, and all of them, do this, and all of them are food stamp defrauders. And that was another thing I would encounter. So I would be at checkout at Walmart, and people would be saying, "Oh, is the government going to buy that for you too?"
You're kidding.
Oh no, it's hostile out there for people who looked like I looked. And so you can imagine why it took me 4 years to break that down and overcome that fear to the point where it was more painful to remain inside than it was to leave. And it was pretty painful to leave, because I gave up my family and I gave up my friends, right? And going into a hostile environment. So there's this tension between being able to leave and do what you need to do, and being able to survive on the outside. And it was like breaking the sound barrier. Very, very difficult. And so, again, that's why I do what I do. When my mom was kicked out about 6 months after I left. And she moved to St. George. She moved in with me, and she would go to the driver's license division to change her driver's license. And they kept sending her away for, "I need more documentation. Oh, now we need this. Oh, now we need that." And they sent her away 8 times.
You're kidding.
And finally she went back and said, "Look, I have been here all these times. If you need anything else, just give it all to me at once so I can just come back all in one time and do it." She says, why do you do this? And the woman looked at her and she said, "Frankly, we don't want you here."
You kidding?
I'm not. I wish I were.
Why would people be that way?
Well, again, it's because, first of all, the polygamists are weird, right? And so we create this, we create criminals out of them. We create deviants, right? And so it's a social construction that, and I'm, this is one of my studies that I'm doing in my master's program, the social construction of target populations, right? So we socially construct that these are deviants, and it's okay to mistreat them, and it's okay to pass laws against them, and it's okay to mistreat them on the streets and in our government agencies, because we've created this social dialogue around what these people are and who they are. And so that's one of the reasons that it's so difficult for people on the inside to report crimes. So it's like, if there is, a kind of exploitation and abuse that Warren was perpetrating on the people, nobody was going to come forward and say anything because they were afraid that their family would be taken away from them.
And probably would have been.
Oh, and probably. And so because of that, we force these populations, and it's not just the FLDS, there are others, sex workers and undocumented people, and, people who use marijuana. I mean, just there's all kinds of populations that we do this to, and we other them, and we create deviants out of them, and so then they go underground, and that's where they're exploited, and that's where the kind of crimes that start to happen. Whereas if we were able to let them come out into the open, then they would be able to get help, and they would be able to access resources and report crimes and things like that, and then it would make it easier for them to leave that situation too. And so that's just, I've spent the last 14 probably years.
How long have you been out?
I think it's been 14 years. It might be longer. I can't remember.
We'll accept 14 years.
I'm sorry?
We'll accept 14 years.
Okay. And so I've spent all of these intervening years creating, first of all, resources for people to come out and to get help, and to hopefully, get their children back, because that's one of the crimes that Warren perpetrated, was he kidnapped children from their parents. And he told them that God wanted them to separate from their children and go off and repent, and then he would send these children off into different homes. And so one of the things I help usually moms and sometimes dad do is reunite with their children. And through legal resources, I help them get on their feet. I help them get food and housing and mental health access, help them transition into education. And so these are the kinds of things that I do. And now being on the board of the United Effort Plan Trust, which is the trust that owns the homes and lands out there, I'm working inside the community now, and the community is rapidly changing. I mean, the citizens are getting involved and engaged. There is a lower percentage of people who still follow Warren than people who don't. And so people are putting their children back into school out there. The schools are growing at a rapid pace.
I noticed that.
It's fantastic. And people are getting engaged, registering to vote. They're going to have an election in Hilldale this year that might overturn the current regime, and in Colorado City next year. So we're seeing a lot of really, really great transition, but still, because of what Warren did to the community and to the families and to the individuals, there's a great deal of poverty and, you know, people emotionally and psychologically injured by what he did. And a lot of people who lack education, because the people who are 22 years old now have never been in public school, because he stopped that school when they were 6 years old. And so we have a whole, you know, generation now who haven't had access to proper education. And so helping them find remedial education or find, you know, technical education that can make them employable is a big, big deal. Bringing businesses back into the community and doing economic development is a big deal. Those are things we're working on inside the community. And then Cherish Families has a building inside the community from which we do food distribution and case management and help people get access to services that they need and referrals and those kinds of things. So it's really exciting, but it's really an uphill battle as well, because funding isn't always an issue, right? It's like we're doing everything we can. In fact, we do probably 3 times more than we should with the funding we have, just because, you know, the extra times we're volunteering.
Well, Winston Churchill once said, "We've done so much with so little for so long, we're now capable of doing anything with nothing." So
Well,
you're reaching that point, huh?
Well, for many years, and actually for at least 10 years, 11, 12 years, I was doing it for free. I was just voluntarily doing it, really on an individual and an informal basis. I didn't have an organization, I didn't have any funding. I would just individually help people who came and asked for help. And then I would individually go and like help the school district understand how to help these kids that are transitioning in and who don't have the social construction that most of the other kids have, that they don't know of pop culture, and, you know, how to help those kids transition into education in a way that's safe for those kids, and, you know, they won't be subject to bullying and, you know, too much peer pressure, those kinds of things. So I was just really doing that on my own for many, many years. And now we have a grant from the Federal Victims of Crime Act, which is helpful. I mean, it really increases the amount of work we can do. But, you know, a lot of the other things we're doing, like we're doing a Christmas event in the community where we're, you know, letting the kids all come and have Christmas, which was one of the things that was banned, right? All those
They
years.
banned Christmas?
Oh yeah, we never got to have Christmas growing up. And so, you know, having Christmas is a new event and experience, and it's so interesting.
What an exciting thing.
It is. It's really exciting, and it's so much fun, and it's so gratifying to see, you know, with a little bit of strategically placed resources and help and guidance, you know, people can make huge trajectory changes. And we're talking an entire population.
How many people involved out there, roughly?
Probably 7,000. 7,000, and the majority of them are in poverty. So like in Water Canyon School, 98% of the kids are on the free and reduced lunch program. So you know that poverty really, really factors into a lot of these things, you know, and the people are so resilient. You know, when you think about the kinds of things that they've been through and the fact that they get out of bed and they make meals and they get their kids off to school, that takes huge resilience. And for the kids that are in remedial education, you know, they've suddenly been put into 6th grade, but they've had maybe a 2nd or 3rd grade homeschool education. It's huge resilience for them to go to school. You know, and so I look at the population with utter awe and compassion. And that's really one of the things that, you know, if nothing else comes out of this interview, that the compassion and understanding for the population in their transition. You know, it doesn't matter what they look like, right? So if you run into somebody in Walmart or Costco and they look like one of those people, you have no idea what's going on in their heads, and they deserve to be treated with respect and dignity like any other human being.
The little I know about the Bible, it says you're supposed to love your neighbor no matter what type of dress she wears.
Right.
And help them. Love God and love your neighbor. Isn't there a scripture about that somewhere?
You would think. I understand that to be the case.
There's another one that says, judge not that ye be not judged.
Well, there's that. But I mean, it's human nature to judge others, you know, especially because this is a predominantly LDS area.
Right.
And these people are a corruption, according to the predominant LDS view. These people are a corruption of our religion, and we want everybody to know that we're not them, right? It's very, very important for the church to maintain this dialogue. In every newspaper article you read, then it ends with the byline, the LDS church does not practice polygamy, and that is in their best interest to make sure that people know they are not us. And so, but that filters down through the population, and especially in St. George and in areas where it's concentrated, and there's these two populations that don't agree, right? That it makes it okay for them to mistreat them because they know that the church is putting out this message, they are not us. And so I don't think that was the LDS Church's intention, but that's what's happening. Right. And so, just to get that message out that, we have a lot more in common than we have.
Well, there's a great American philosopher once who said, "We have learned through sad experience the nature and disposition of almost all men. As soon as they get a little authority, as they suppose, they immediately begin to exercise unrighteous dominion." He left women out of that, but we're here to help other people,
yes,
whoever they are and whatever they are. I've never understood bullying, and that's what it is, mm-hmm. bullying other people, whether it's in high school or grade school or wherever it is.
In the legislature?
You're good. You're ahead of me. The Lost Boys. Tell me about them.
Okay, so that is another way that the mainstream society has socially constructed the population, right? So that term was made up by the Attorney General's office when they wanted to initiate the lawsuit to take control of the trust. And what they did was they noticed that there was a large number of boys, usually teenagers and young adults, who, for whatever reason, were no longer part of the community, and they were out kind of just twisting in the wind. A lot of them turned to self-medication, drug addiction, because of the psychological harm that's happened to them, being separated from their family and having attachment issues now, right? So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that happens when people go out and they have no other moral grounding other than what they're rejecting. Then all of a sudden, there's no structure. So there were a lot of these lost boys who were just out there, and someone started to gather them up, and the Attorney General's office, from my understanding, this was told to me by somebody inside the Attorney General's office, and I'm just repeating what I was told. They realized that they could kind of capitalize on that. So they gathered up a lot of these boys and interviewed them and found out their story and trotted them up on the Capitol steps and held a press conference and labeled them Lost Boys. I really, really am rankled by that for a number of reasons, and one of them is that, so now the dialogue is that all these boys were expelled, which isn't true. Most of them chose to leave on their own because there was too many restrictions on them, right? They couldn't watch movies, they couldn't date or flirt with girls, and they couldn't go out and play basketball anymore. These kinds of things that were being torn down by Warren Jeffs. And so a lot of them chose to leave on their own. Some of them were expelled, and some of them were just taken out and dropped off on the street because that's the dominant discourse about those. But not all of them. And the truth of the matter is there were girls that would happen to as well, and women and men. But now the lost boys have this label, and they have these expectations now. You're supposed to behave in this way because you're a lost boy. And I really I resist that kind of labeling from outside. I think that a population should be able to define itself rather than having a definition imposed on it, and especially a negative definition like that.
You have a fantastic understanding of what's going on out there and what needs to be done. What needs to be done? How can people help you do it?
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you asked that question. In preparation for our Christmas event, we would love donations. Monetary donations is always fantastic. And
how can they get the donations to you?
So if they go to our website, cherishfamilies.org, CherishFamilies.org. There's a donate button on there that they can donate, and we can send out, because we're a 501c3, we can send out letters for their tax deduction. We take donations of clothing, mostly right now we're trying to clothe the school children, and we need like jeans and shoes and new underwear and new stockings, things like that. And I can give you the number to my donation coordinator, or she can be contacted through the website as well. But money is fantastic. Toys are really great. So last year, I want to tell the story because it really, symbolizes what's happening out there so much. We were doing a Christmas event last year, and we didn't know what the teenagers wanted, the kids in high school. And so we just went and did a survey because, you know, it's a unique population. They haven't had exposure to so many of the things that most teenagers have. And so we went and did a survey in the high school about the kinds of things that those kids would want to receive for Christmas. And it is the most heartbreaking thing, and I'm not going to cry.
You may make me cry.
The number one answer that came back was food.
Food?
The number one thing that they requested, teenagers, for Christmas. You know, they didn't ask for electronics or, you know, video games or those kinds of things. They needed food, which speaks to their, you know, their very survival. And the number two item was warm clothing. And so, you know, I'm not going to cry. So knowing, you know, the kind of destruction that's happened to the population through Warren Jeffs and his actions, and through society at large because of the way that they've ostracized them, knowing that there's work from the ground up to be done, you know, bringing in jobs, hiring these people even though they don't have a high school diploma. They're excellent workers and they have an incredible work ethic. You know, just bringing in resources to help get them on their feet and emotionally stable. This is the kind of work that needs to be done, and anybody that wants to support that, I urge them to go to our website and contact us. We all of the support any support we will take.
What's the website again?
cherishfamilies.org.
We've got 1 minute and 30 seconds left. What's your final word?
My final word really is be compassionate. Be understanding, you know.
Be compassionate. That's the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Well, it seems like it'd be a really good place to apply it, especially to people that you may look down on or you might not understand. But I just urge people, anybody that's watching this, when you encounter somebody, and you will, in Walmart or in Costco or on the street or, hey, at the driver's license division, be kind. Be kind. Assume that with some help and with some understanding and some compassion on your part, that you can change their life, because you probably can.
There's a saying, if you have a choice between being right and being kind, be kind and you'll always be right.
I couldn't agree more.
Shirlee Draper, thank you so much for what you do and for being with us on A Story to Tell.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful visiting with you. This is Lane Rano from the campus of Dixie State University on A Story to Tell. Thank you for being with us.